recruitment coordinator. I kind of deal with mainly post-secondary students and their relationship with mentors. Some of the people here probably at least recognize my name, I'm sure. So I just wanted to welcome you all and just let you know that today we are hoping by the end of this. Oh, did somebody else? Noel? No? I just wanted to say that we hope that by the end of the symposium that students feel inspired about higher education and STEM, and that we hope that students want to persist into careers in STEM fields. We are lucky tonight to have two amazing speakers. I'm going to introduce our first speaker, and then in between, I'll introduce our second speaker. So our first speaker is Dr. Brendan Leahy. He's from the University of Georgia. Dr. Leahy has worked on a wide variety of institutes, programs, and initiatives, including those focused on leadership development, general facilitation, as well as organizational and community strategic planning. In addition, he serves as an adjunct instructor for the University of Georgia's Division for Academic Enhancement. He teaches university courses designed to help freshmen and sophomores successfully adapt to the rigors of college academics. And Dr. Leahy is passionate about working with and on behalf of individuals with disabilities and has worked on a number of STEM-related initiatives. And we welcome you here, Dr. Leahy, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say tonight.
All right, thank you, Summer. I appreciate that introduction. You'll have to all bear with me. I give lots of presentations and I talk to lots of groups, but this is an entirely new experience for me. So I'm experiencing a learning curve as I'm giving you a presentation. So if there's any glitches or technical difficulties, I apologize in advance. Well, I think she did a good job kind of putting me in context. I am Brendan Leahy. I do work at the University of Georgia. I work at a place called the Fanning Institute here on campus. It's part of public service and outreach, and I'm kind of a general facilitator, and I work with a variety of groups, work with adult leadership development, youth leadership development, and we work with a lot of community and nonprofit organizations, and we do kind of strategic planning. So I'm kind of a general facilitator, and we'll talk more about that later on, but I love my job because I think we do good work and we help people. I love my job because it really hits my strengths, and it's a real good match for me. It's something that I feel very strongly about, that you can't be happy unless you find a context in which your strengths meet the demands of a particular job. Just to give you a little bit of background, I kind of identify myself in. Is that all right? We're okay. I identify myself as an individual with a specific learning disability, and I'll be honest with you, in my general life, no one really knows about it. I don't go around talking about it at work, or if I'm doing a community leadership program. It's not something that comes up, but it has kind of fueled my work a little bit, and I've done a number of projects. I've worked with the State Department of Education, and I've worked on a project called Student Achievement in the Least Restrictive Environment, and that was about helping students with disabilities be included into the mainstream environment. And again, I'll talk a little bit about that, but I feel very strongly it's one thing to have a learning disability. It's another entirely to be excluded from the mainstream environment where the core curriculum is being taught. So I worked on that for a few years. And then I worked with some friends at Georgia Tech on a program called SciTrain University, and we worked here specifically at UGA, working with professors, helping them to kind of create an environment in their classrooms that were more conducive to all learners, and we call that universal design. And again, so there's a part of me at one point in my life I just kind of wanted to move on and stop thinking about learning disabilities and just get on with my life. I just have this nagging voice in my head all the time, though, that there's a lot of people that are just like me, that are, they're not doing all that well, and I feel like I have an obligation to kind of speak out and maybe work when I can with and on behalf of those students. So just briefly, I'm kind of a classic case. I was thinking this afternoon about early education, and for me, when I think back as far as I can think, my earliest memories, and this is kind of sad, but my earliest memories of school are headaches. I just remember having headaches all the time, being at school, having headaches. I remember just having terrible headaches, waking up. I remember faking having headaches so I didn't have to go to school. I think that's just a sign that there's a little boy who has some stress. Some of the other memories I have are just kind of being in the resource room when all my friends were kind of going on with their lessons. I being asked to leave to go to the resource room. And I'm in my early 40s, so I'm just old enough. I think I just missed a time where people were really starting to do neat things for folks with learning disabilities. I just missed the curve, especially for my early years, where the unit of analysis wasn't really about me and my well-being. It was about the classroom and the pace of the classroom, and the resource room happened to be about folks who it was a place to send folks who weren't on pace, or maybe even some other kids who weren't behaving. And so I found myself in the behavior room, the resource room a lot. After a number of years, I was up to about fourth grade, I got formally diagnosed. My mother was concerned. I was the youngest of 6 kids, and some of my siblings had done really well. And I had a brother that was accepted to Harvard, and he ultimately went to Dartmouth, and he was an athlete and a scholar, and he was doing remarkably well in life. And my mother kept telling me that, I really believe in my heart of hearts that you're not too far off of your older brother. There's just something amiss. There's something going on where I experience a fairly intelligent, bright young man at home, and then you seem to go off to school and things are not going well. So my mother was a real strong advocate for me. So she wasn't happy with the way things were going, and so she sent me to Boston Children's Hospital when I was in fourth grade. And there was a guy there named Mel Levine, and he had a team, and they were doing some neat assessments and things. And I was kind of formally diagnosed with a learning disability in fourth grade. And looking back on the IEP that they helped to design, it was very simple things like Brendan has a specific learning disability, he has processing issues, he also has some writing issues, dysgraphia. So why don't we go to his strengths, and for certain assessments make him or allow him to respond orally and things. And so there was fairly simple things, but they weren't quite being done. And so I continued to struggle beyond fourth grade. I went on to middle school, and again, despite my mother's advocacy and despite the fact that I had an IEP that said I was actually above average intelligence, and that I should be included in the mainstream environment, I was continually sent to the resource room. And again, that's a real problem, because your initial problems of having the disability get compounded by the fact that you're not exposed to the curriculum. And so then you have two problems. You have your issues, and then you also have the fact that you're not being exposed to things. And so things tend to mushroom, and your standardized test scores probably reflect not only your disability, but also the fact that you haven't been exposed to things. And so I continued on through middle school, got to 8th grade. There was an IEP meeting during which the IEP team looked at my mother and said, "Mrs. Leahy, you keep talking about Brendan's older brothers and how well they've done and how Brendan seems reasonably intelligent to you, but we hate to break the news to you, but we're professionals, and in our professional experience, Brendan has a fairly bleak future, and we should teach Brendan to push a wheelbarrow or ride a dump truck, or let's get off this pipe dream of going to college and all of the stuff that you keep talking about." So during that IEP meeting, my mother she just pulled me out of, we just walked out. And the thing that I hadn't told you about is there was a couple of years back, there was a private Catholic school taught by nuns, and my mother had tried to get me in that school along the way. And she would go and she would have this file folder with the diagnosis from Boston Children's Hospital and all of these formal assessments and this, that, and the other. And the nuns just were a little leery of that, and they said, we'll pray for Brendan, but we won't let him into the school. So my mother had been frustrated she couldn't get me into that school. So in 8th grade, when I get this bleak future diagnosis during my IEP meeting, my mother just grabbed me by the hand and walked me out. And I have many stories to tell you about my mother, but this is the only one that I'll tell you, is that she actually threatened a nun. She pulled me up to, there's a school called St. Joseph's in Salem, Massachusetts, and she knocked on the door, and we kind of barged in on Sister Alice, and she was the principal at the time, and she said, "Sister, you've denied Brendan for about 4 years now. I've tried to get him in here." Well, I was just told that he has no future at at the public school that I was at, and so I pulled him out, and he's not going back. And so if you don't accept him, I'm willing to go to jail. And so, needless to say, I was in a Catholic school uniform the next day. That was I was in 8th grade at the time, and so they agreed to accept me, and they accepted me on a probationary period. And when I got there, I showed up, and I had a 2-week probationary period. And to make a long story short, I really hadn't been exposed. I really hadn't been. Nope. Is that me? Okay. To me, I wasn't really prepared for that, and so I told you that I hadn't been exposed to. We're good. Okay. Just keep talking through it. All right. I hadn't been exposed to the curriculum, like I had said, and this curriculum at this private Catholic school was driven to help kids get into fairly elite Catholic schools around the North Shore area of Boston. So when I went in there, I mean, I was just blown away by what they were doing. They were doing pre-algebra, and they were diagramming sentences, and music class which was, I used to, electives and those types of specials were more of a refuge for me, where you could just kind of go and bang on a triangle and just relax and get away from your problems. They were playing the recorder and reading sheet music, and so their curriculum was just blew me away. So after the 2 weeks, they told my mother that I was going to get kicked out of there because I just was woefully unprepared, and they didn't want me to be leaving their school with their stamp of approval moving on into the world. And so I had been at the school for 2 weeks in 8th grade, and then in a last-ditch effort to keep me there, my mother said, all right, I have a proposal. How about instead of kicking him out, we just throw him back to 7th grade? And that was fine, but this is a fairly small school, and I was the new kid, and I had been in 8th grade for 2 weeks. And then I had to show up for that 3rd week in 7th grade, and people were questioning, well, what happened? And I had to make up silly little things like, well, I just wanted to check out the 8th grade experience before I had it, and maybe I'll settle in here to 7th grade to see how this is. So it was just kind of an embarrassing, terrible experience. It was something that was very painful, but in retrospect, it was pretty good, because I got a couple of years where there was no special education. There was no label of being a student with a learning disability. There was no resource room. There was just these nuns and this intense curriculum and academic rigor and high standards. And it was very, very difficult. I continued to really struggle. And I say in my outline here that I had a note to myself that I had kind of hidden improvements. I think I continued to get terrible grades because I was functioning at a 7th and 8th grade level. But I hadn't been exposed to a lot, and so I was probably jumping from 4th grade levels to 6th grade levels and making quantum leaps in this, that, and the other. But they weren't being reflected in the assessments and things, and so I continued to struggle, and I felt bad. But I think I did learn a tremendous amount from that experience. My high school experience, I went on to a pretty well-known all-male Catholic high school, all taught by Zavarian brothers, and again, it's a college prep high school. And between you, me, and the light post, I had no business going there. But I alluded to the fact that I had some smart older brothers, and they had gone on to Ivy League schools. And the other thing that you need to know is that my mother was a devout Catholic, and she worked the bingo program at this particular school for 20 some odd years. So she had sent, and she was a strong advocate, and she had helped the brothers with their bingo program. And so I was accepted, and I wasn't their standard person to get accepted in there. So I get to this school, and again, I think I've made tremendous improvements. I've had 7th and 8th grade. I've been kind of exposed to some core things that I hadn't been exposed to before, but I was not prepared for what was about to come for a college prep curriculum. And my freshman year was just a disaster. One thing that I will say is that I do have some pretty strong self-advocacy skills. I'm pretty chatty, and I'm a pretty friendly guy, and I'm willing to interact, and I'm willing to go the extra mile. And so I think I survived my first year by working real hard and just kind of being charming and kind of going around after school and looking for extra help opportunities and things. And so I had a low C average. The other thing I didn't tell you about is that I had some athletic success, and so I was a football standout, and I was also a track standout. I was just a fast kid, and so I could score touchdowns and return kickoffs, and I could win 100-yard dashes, and so that was kind of nice because it was something that provided for me success, and I hadn't had a lot of success around. And in fact, after my freshman year, I was in the school newspaper, and they had identified me as super frosh, and so that was kind of a wonderful thing for me because nothing good had ever come from school. And so academically it stunk and I was terrible, but I was surviving by the skin of my teeth. Athletically I was starting to thrive and being recognized. I went on to my sophomore year, and sophomore year was a real disaster because it just hit all of my weaknesses. I tend to be I'm a fairly verbal person. Reading wasn't too much of a problem, but kind of math and language, applied sciences were always an issue for me. I had the executive functioning problems about being organized and time management. If you gave me a piece of paper, I really didn't know what to do with it. Sophomore year, we had there was chemistry, there was geometry, and I had Spanish 2, and it was just too much. It was more than I could even do, even with all my strategies. It was just too much homework and it was too much stuff, and so I ultimately failed one class, had to go to summer school. I managed to stay academically eligible, not because of my merit, probably just because I was able to charm certain people into giving me just enough to stay eligible. My narrative can go on and on and on, but after my sophomore year, it was kind of a low point, and I really began to doubt myself, and I really started to consider just dropping out of school and just thinking that, maybe I am just dumb and that this isn't for me, and I could just drop out. I was already older anyway because I had done 7th grade twice, and so I was almost eligible to do that. And so I was really considering just digging my feet and just failing out and dropping out of school. I had one of the coaches on the track team was a real good advocate for me, and he pulled me aside and he told me that he believed in me and he really thought that I could potentially have a really good future. He thought that I could academically turn it around, and that maybe I could even run in college if I put my mind to it. And to make a long story short, I had some kind of an epiphany after my sophomore year in high school, and I just remember thinking to myself, I'm either going to quit or I'm going to go for it. And I'm very happy that I decided to go for it because it turned out fairly well for me. So I made this commitment to myself, and I said I'm going to kind of really look at my profile, look at my strengths, and look at my weaknesses, and try to find those areas, and just try to where are my real issues? Because I think what was starting to happen was that I was dealing with academic troubles. I had the learning problems, but I was also a nervous mess. I used to get very uptight. Somebody would draw something on the board, and I would think to my first thought, the first voice in my head was, I can't learn this. This is too hard. I could never do it. And then, frankly, there was a point where I started to kind of give up, and there were simple things like notebook checks or, memorizing 10 spelling words, and I wasn't doing those. And so I was kind of a mess after sophomore year, so I decided I am going to do the best that I can do in every area. And if it's something simple like memorizing 10 vocabulary words or keeping my notebook organized so that when there's a notebook check, I get a 100 instead of a 0. I decided I was going to scoop up all the points that are available in courses because they're gimmies. And then I was going to study my rear end off and work really, really hard. And then where my learning disability kicked in, and if I really got tripped up, so be it. But that I was gonna work to the best of my ability was my commitment. So I came back my junior year, and to make a long story short, things really started to click. People ask me all the time, can you talk more about it? I don't understand what happened. I think I went into it with full guns a-blazing and a renewed vigor. Academically, things started to go really well for me. I realized that the universe would respond to my hard work, and so I started to get really good grades. And I actually had a commitment that one of my things one of the promises that I made to myself my sophomore summer was, I'm going to shock the world and get on the dean's list during my junior year. And my first semester, dean's list was 85 or above in all of your classes. And my first semester I came up, I had 85 or above in all of my classes, except for, I think it was Algebra 2. I had an 83 in Algebra 2. And we got our final, there was this, this kind of notification that was sent home to kind of preface the report card, kind of indicating what the final grade was going to be. And I looked, and 85, 85, 85, 90, and then there was this 83. And I went to my Algebra 2 teacher, and I just went to her, and she said, well, what's wrong, Brendan? You seem to be doing really well. Look at your past history, and you usually don't do so well in math. I feel like this is wonderful. And I said, well, between you and me, I kind of made this promise to myself, and no one knows about it. Not my mother, not my track coach, nobody. And I made this commitment that I was going to get on the dean's list, and I really had hoped to do it this first semester. And she looked, and she said, well, the math just doesn't add up. You have an 83. And so she kind of was a hardline math teacher, and she kind of ended the conversation by saying, I just can't do it. You got an 83. I just can't in good conscience give you 2 points. So I went home crushed, thinking that I wasn't going to get on the honor roll my junior year. Next day, I walk into school, and I get summoned to her classroom via the office. And they said, your math teacher wants to see you. And she said, so I went in. She said, Brendan, I have been thinking, and I've been up all night. I've been kind of agonizing over this. And she said, I feel really strongly that I want to support your progress. And she said, if we keep this between the two of us, I will loan you 2 points this semester. And come hell or high water, I don't care what your grade is next semester, I'm taking them back so that I can go to summer with my conscience clear, knowing that I didn't mess with the math. Your final grade will be your final grade. So I'm going to loan you 2 points. And so she loaned me 2 points. And I swear to you, I swear that if she had not loaned me those 2 points, I would have thrown the towel in and just given up, because I was just disgusted. So she loaned me the 2 points. No one knew about it. I got on the dean's list. My name was in the newspaper. I really shocked the world by doing well that first semester. Also, my junior year, I was named captain of my track team, and I was league champion in the 300-yard dash indoors and 220-yard dash outdoors. And so, athletically, captain, league champ. I had been on the dean's list, so things were going really well. And I'll be honest with you, once things started to go well, I never really looked back. I continued to do really well. I finished up strong for my junior year. Then ultimately, my senior year went on, and just kind of the momentum continued. Ultimately, I did not take any final exams my senior year, and to not take final exams, you had to have a 90 or above in all your classes. And so I eventually evolved into somebody that I could actually look people in the eye and say that I was an A student. And so ultimately I went from a terrible low C's my first 2 years, B's junior year, and A's my senior year. And as I applied to colleges, I wrote brutally honest essays, and I explained where I've been, what I've learned about myself. And I identified the trajectory that I'm on. I said, if you look at the scores that I'm on, I've gone from failing to C's to B's to ultimately A's, and I plan on continuing this trajectory if you accept me into your fine institution. The other thing I didn't mention, I took the SATs, and because my mother had thought to get me diagnosed, I was eligible for some accommodations, which was a fairly rare thing during those days. And the accommodation was time. So I got to sit and suffer with the SAT examination a little bit longer than everybody else. And I think because of that, my score reflected more along the lines of what I was capable of doing. And nowadays, the scores it's not the same. But there was a time when breaking 1,000 meant a great deal. And then if you broke 1,000, you had a lot of options, and if you didn't have as many options. And I was somewhere in the 1,100 range. And I remember going to my guidance counselor, and he wanted to just kiss me. He couldn't believe that had happened. And so I went to him one time and I said, do you think I should prepare to take them again? And my guidance counselor, in a very loving way, said, Brendan, I don't think we should test fate. I got the scores we need. You've done well this year. You're a team captain. You're a league champ. You have reasonable scores. I actually have things that I think I can work with you, and I think I can get you into college. I applied to a number of schools: safety school, regular state school. I had one school on my list that was Boston College, and Boston College was just like my pipe dream school. It was just this ridiculous reach school. I had no business even applying. So I took my SAT scores and I took my transcripts and I wrote my brutally honest essay, and I paid my $50 or whatever, and I sent my oh, she does, okay. So I sent my transcripts off. The other thing that I got to do at Boston College that I didn't get to do at other places, it's all right. All right. The thing that I got to do at Boston College was to go in for an interview, and they factored in the interview, and I went in there and I do quite well in interview situations. It's something that I do. I'm a chatty guy, and so I could go in. I connected with the interviewer, really pleaded my case, talked my story, talked about how I really thought I was a good fit. BC loved students that were involved and were actually captain of sports. It was something like 85% of their student body were the captain of a particular sport. The other thing that I had going for me was there were some folks at Boston College, and they were beginning a program for students with learning disabilities. It was just the time, I think we're talking 1990. It's kind of a great time for learning disabilities. People were really starting to research it. They were talking about it. There were articles written about it. It was kind of a trendy term at that time. And so they had this program. And so I having identified myself, I got a letter, and I was accepted into Boston College. And so for those 2 years, my junior year, senior year, I really did shock the world. I shocked myself, turned things around, and kind of really at the 11th hour, right? There wasn't much time left for good things to happen for me. And I think there was some divine intervention, because I don't know how it all came together. So I successfully graduated from a good high school. Okay. Then got on to Boston College, and I will just say that there's not a ton to say about my college career, in that it went really well. I did well. I got a degree in sociology and education. I had a concentration in it was called mild learning disabilities. I was fascinated by it, and I felt that maybe I was going to be a teacher and help students out like myself. So basically, my college career went reasonably well. I had some accommodations in terms of if it was a huge test, I would go through the disability center, and I would get extended time on bigger tests. I took a reduced course load where I took 4 courses each semester, and then I would take 2 each summer. And my strategy was always, whatever course was going to be a concern to me, I would isolate them and take them in the summer, and I would take them at different times. And so if there was a math course, something an advanced math, or I would always isolate the hardest class, take it, and if I needed a tutor, I would get a tutor. I was really scared of taking foreign language really beat me up in high school. Really beat me up, and it didn't really respond to my efforts, and I always struggled with it. And I was scared to death of having to take it. And there are a lot of students now, and there's talk of, should we work with them and get them a waiver for their foreign language requirements. I didn't have to do that because there were loopholes in Boston College's curriculum at the time. I think they've since closed, but you could take a fine arts and a communications course, and it would match up, and you could cross off a foreign language requirement. So I just worked the standard loopholes that everybody else had, and it allowed me to avoid foreign language. So to make a long story short, college went pretty well. I had to work a lot and had to pay for it, and those are separate issues. But academically, I continued to do really well, and I graduated with like a 4.0, not a 4.0, like a 3.4 GPA. I worked for a year, and then I thought I had just gotten married, and my wife was talking about graduate school, and I had never really thought about graduate school. I was frankly happy to be done with school. I never really liked school. And so my wife was saying, well, I think I'm going to go get a master's degree. And in her family, both her parents had PhDs, and that was just a given. And I hadn't been exposed to that. And so I started thinking, well, maybe I need to go to graduate school too. And so we were looking for places, and my wife happens to be from Athens, Georgia. And she applied, and she got into a program. She actually had Dr. Greg as a professor. And so she was here in her education program. And I, not being one to be outdone, I of course felt obligated that I too had to go to graduate school. No, I actually really, I had considered it and thought that would be something that I would like to have as a credential. So I applied to the adult ed department, and I had my transcripts from Boston College, and I took the GREs, and ghosts of the past kind of came back. My scores weren't great. And so when I applied, I was accepted, but there was a provisional acceptance that you had. I was kind of on secret probation, and you had to take those first 2 classes, and they wanted to see how you did. And then if you did okay, you'd be accepted. Well, I got 2 A's, and I was accepted into the program. I continued to study on with the program, and I graduated with a master's in 1998, and I had a 4.0 average. I did not use a ton of accommodations. At this point, that was a great question. The question was, to use accommodations. Yeah, no, that's all right. I didn't use as many accommodations because, I'll be honest with you, when you make the jump to graduate school, you tend to find, hopefully, you jump in a direction that's in keeping with your strengths. And so this program was really designed for me. It was about writing papers, and I'm a strong writer. It was about developing PowerPoints and presentations, and those are all things that I was quite comfortable with. And so I did well, but I used strategies. I would isolate specific classes, like statistics classes. I would take them in the summertime, and I would work with a tutor if I had to on a particular class. So the program just kind of hit my strengths, and I did well. I graduated, like I said, in 1998 with a master's, and I thought that was great. I thought, boy, I've done reasonably well. Then I couldn't believe when my major professor and some of the other folks that were on my master's committee said, we really think that you're a good fit in this program. We like having you around. We think that you represent us well. You've obviously done quite well in our program. We'd love to have you around as a doctoral student. I couldn't believe that people were even considering that, and that they would ask me. And so they said, we think you should apply. So I applied. And now here's the irony. I'll be honest with you. I probably could have retaken some GRE scores and things, but at this point I was like, well, I got a 4.0 in that department before, and so I took my old crummy scores and I sent them on. Well, wouldn't you know it, I was accepted, but instead of secret probation, this time I was on double secret probation. I had to take 2 classes and see how I would do in the department that I had the 4.0 in from my master's program. So I took those 2 classes. I did well. I went on through my program. Again, I loved it. It was great information. I enjoyed the content. It really helped me. I felt it was valuable. And it also, more importantly, again, it really hit my strengths. And so I graduated. And again, I'm proud to say I graduated with a 4.0 GPA. And I don't say that to show off. I just say that if you know the beginning of my story, that's something I'm pretty proud of. And so I graduated in 2002 with a doctorate in adult education. And I will say that that doctorate has opened up so many doors for me. I can't even begin to tell you that I've had contracts, and I've had programs and opportunities, and I've met with folks, and I frankly couldn't have been at the table had I not had the doctorate. That was just a door opener for me. And so the farther I went in school, the better things got for me in terms of a lot of things. The program just kind of fitting my profile. Things that are of concern tend to drop by the wayside because they're not as focused. So the higher you go, the more likely you are to kind of just find that niche that's in keeping with your strengths. And so that worked out quite well for me. I'll just kind of wrap up, and what I really want to say is I never want people to think that when I'm talking that I'm standing up here in my avatar form saying how great I am. That it's the opposite of that. I really, really believe, I don't mean this in a terrible way, but I'm kind of a dime a dozen. I am one. I think there's tons of people like me, and in my work in K through 12, and in my work at the college level, I found lots of people, and I swear to you, not just being self-deprecating, but a lot of people who they have a lot more ability than I have, and they're not doing well, and they're struggling in elementary schools. They're not being included in things. So I've kind of developed into somewhat of a radical, and moving forward, I want to help students who are like me, because I barely made it. I made it at the 11th hour, and I would really like to work with kids that are in high school and help to save them at the 11th hour as well, and develop programs and do some leadership development to help students with disabilities kind of make that transition. Well, first survive high school and then kind of make that transition out. But I want to see things. I want to see folks with learning disabilities. I'd like to see them in gifted classes. I'd like to see them in AP classes in high school. So I've taken my I've taken my philosophy a step further, just beyond least restrictive environment and being included. I'd like them to be included in some of the higher level things as well. Again, because I think there's lots of folks out there. They have a lot to offer, and it's just not working out for them.
Brendan, we have a question. So we want to kind of know, how did you learn about your strengths?
How did I learn about my strengths? I think just through experiencing them. I learned in class. I think that was I learned my weaknesses first. I knew that math was a problem, and the problem. What happened to me early on was, whatever your weakness is, all the interventions are around your weakness. And so you go, if you're not good at math, you go and you struggle at math, and then your teacher keeps you in at recess and you do more math, and you have to stay after school and do math, and if there's extended learning time, it's going to be math. And so you start to think, boy, I'm dumb, I can't do anything. Well, the reality is, no, it's just this subject. It's one subject. As I got up, I started to realize, and again, that epiphany in high school, I started to realize, you know what? I can read real well. I can give a great presentation. I can memorize vocabulary. There's a lot of things that I can do, and I had to fight that temptation just to say, oh, it's too hard, I can't do it. Say, no, specifically, what's too hard? Maybe that one thing is too hard, but there's 10 other things in this course. So I started to learn, maybe I learned a little in middle school, but it got to high school before I started to find my strengths.
There's another question. How did you keep motivated when it was hard?
The question was, how did I keep motivated when it was getting really, really hard in school? I will say one thing that I had a tremendous advocate in my mother. I mean, she just really, really believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. And she would pull me aside it wasn't all flowers and roses. I mean, she pulled me aside and she said, Brendan, I've raised a son that went to an Ivy League school, and I'm dealing with you. And she goes, and don't get me wrong, if you were dumb, I would want you to have a happy, dumb life. And I would do anything in my power to make it a happy, dumb life. But she's like, in my heart of hearts, I really believe you're as smart as your brothers. And something's just going wrong. And so she just wouldn't let me believe that I was dumb. She's like, I don't believe it. I'm not just saying it to say it. So my mother really helped. The other thing that happened to me when I got to high school, I talked about, I didn't do justice to this, but I had a track coach. And his name was Ray. And Ray pulled me aside, and he obviously liked me because I could win races, and I caught his eye because I was fast. Well, then we developed a great relationship, and he became I went through him for guidance counseling. He was my track coach. He was a teacher. He taught history, and he taught some other law classes and things. And then he owned a restaurant. He was my employer, and he called it the Ray treatment that I got. And he really believed in me. And there were times where I really wanted to quit, or when even people at my high school thought that maybe I wasn't quite the material that should be at that high school. And that's when he pulled me aside and said, I don't want you to talk to anybody else. You don't need a guidance counselor. You don't need to go. You come to me for everything. And he literally put me under his wing, and he kind of saved my life. Other questions?
Yeah, are there any questions for Brendan? This was such an amazing amazing presentation. Brendan, thank you so much. I think that we are all super inspired by your determination and your self-advocacy, and just how motivated you and your family were to just persist and stick with it. And despite the odds, you have done so well and succeeded. And we truly thank you so much for coming and telling us your story and all your experiences. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's been a great audience.
Brendan, so glad you came. Noel.
Thank you.
I guess we should go ahead and keep pushing forward so we don't keep everybody here all night long. But I guess I'll introduce our next speaker, Dr. Laura Geroltowski. Dr. Geroltowski is a foodborne disease epidemiologist for the Outbreak Response and Prevention Branch. It's the Division of Food, Water, and Emerging Infectious Diseases at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. She is a lieutenant commander in the U.S. Public Health Service Commission Corps, and she also graduated from George Washington University with a BA in biological anthropology, and went on to get her MPH from Emory University in 2005, and then a PhD in epidemiology at the University of Pittsburgh in 2009. And she was an Epidemic Intelligence Service Officer at the CDC from 2009 to 2011 before her current position. And she's worked on several national multi-state outbreaks of Salmonella and E. coli, infections that have led to numerous product recalls and product safety changes. And we are so pleased also that Dr. Geroltowski is one of our most valued breakthrough mentors and has just been really a blessing to our program. And we want to welcome you, Laura, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks. Thank you for, can everyone hear me okay? Yeah? Okay. We're having some construction done at our house. You might hear some hammering in the background, but I hope it's not too distracting. But thank you for having me speak to you this evening, and thanks for sticking around. Like Summer said, I've been in school for a very long time, and my parents are very pleased that I now have a quote-unquote real job. So just to get started, I would just like to say what an epidemiologist is. Most of the time people think that I am a skin doctor or a dermatologist, but your Greek lesson for today is that epidemiology has three Greek roots, ology meaning the study of, epi means upon, and the demi or demo comes from people. So it's really the study of disease and how disease distribution through a population. And we're kind of the outbreak detectives, disease detectives for CDC, essentially. So, like Summer said, when I went to GW for my undergrad, I was interested in a lot of different things, and I really thought I was going to go to medical school until I volunteered at a women's hospital in the maternity ward and saw some things that I can't unsee, and decided that perhaps medicine wasn't right for me. So I had taken a few anthropology courses and just really loved it, and so I majored in biological anthropology, realizing that besides the TV show Bones, there aren't too many forensic anthropologists out there in the world. So I took a few other courses and in public health, and really liked public health and epidemiology and that kind of thing. So I took a few undergrad courses in it, and then decided to get a master's degree in it. And I really think that grad school is really great for more focused, real training in your field, and that skills that can be directly applied to a career. I think that undergrad is really great for a more general, like, what am I interested in? Okay, I have to take an art class and I have to take an English course, something like that. But when you move into grad school, it's you meet less frequently, and your classes are typically longer hours. But it's a lot of out of the classroom and meeting with mentors and working on a thesis, and so that really attracted me to graduate studies. When I was finishing up at Emory, I started to look around at the types of careers that I wanted to go into, and noticed that I really needed a doctoral degree to really go into any of the careers that I wanted to. One being the Epidemic Intelligence Service, which is a 2-year program at CDC for medical doctors and PhDs, nurses, dentists, and we're kind of like the boots on the ground disease detectives for CDC, and we're deployed all around the world for any outbreak investigation, from SARS, bird flu, hemorrhagic fevers, any disease will be sent around the world to go and investigate. So I did that for 2 years and foodborne disease, and then stuck around in the foodborne area. But the PhD was pretty much a continuation of grad school. It was just 4 more years of taking more classes and then coming up with a dissertation. And I think that STEM careers require a lot of these advanced degrees, and you're highly skilled when you come out of it. So sometimes it does equal higher paying. Sometimes, unfortunately, the more degrees you have, the less you get paid. But depending on what career you end up in, that isn't always true. Having a grad degree also improves, your chances of finding work in a variety of different industries. At CDC, if anyone is interested in careers there, most of our people do have master's level degrees. Kind of like our surveillance epidemiologists and our lab scientists all have master's level training. And a grad degree can also improve your chances of finding work in healthcare, manufacturing, finance, insurance. And really, if you look around, there's mathematics in pretty much anything. So I would encourage you all to look into grad school programs. There's also a lot of online grad programs. I know quite a few people have done MBAs and things like that, all online, which might be an option for all of you as well. Not sure I have much more to say. I wanted to stay in the time frame, so if anyone has any questions or I'm willing to hear them.
You have to wash your hands first. I see it. No, first we'll wash your hands.
What was my dissertation about? I went to the University of Pittsburgh, and there is a chronic disease focus at that university. I joke that it's because of all the old people who live in Pittsburgh, but I'm not really sure that's accurate. And so I looked at type 2 diabetes, and I used geographic analysis to look at if people who have diabetes in rural areas, if they live closer to where they get their treatment done, or diabetes clinics, and where they go for their diabetes education, and if they live closer to larger grocery stores or like Walmarts or something like that, and if they have better glucose reading, just are a little bit more healthier than people who have diabetes who live further away. Because in rural populations of Pennsylvania, they typically your grocery stores are convenience stores, and you have to travel long distances for your diabetes education and things like that. So, and it was true, people who lived further away tended to have worse glucose and things like that. So. Let's see. What would I say to high school students about careers? When I was a high school student, I kind of knew I wanted to go into the sciences or medicine, so I did a lot of research on the internet and different government. I kind of always knew I wanted to work for the government for some reason, and so I looked at CDC and HHS as a whole, Health and Human Services, and looked around and tried to find careers that they all have web links on their websites to careers, and I found the Epidemic Intelligence Service back then and just thought it was the most exciting, awesomest job ever. And so decided, what do I need to be that person with that job? And so that's pretty much how I decided I was either going to be a medical doctor who went and did that, or a PhD who went and became an EIS officer. And I do have to plug that it is the most awesomest 2-year job ever. So if anyone's interested in that. Any other questions? Oh, yes, it's true. Summer did mention the Commission Corps. So the Public Health Service is kind of like the National Guard for public health. And there are a few training programs within the Commission Corps. And they're generally people who have degrees in health sciences, but it's anywhere. It can be physical therapists or doctors or dentists, nurses, people with mental health degrees. And they do have a few internships. They will help with your grad school training, and you owe them so many years and things like that. That information is also on their website, which is usphs.gov, and you can find some of that. I think it's a link at the top that talks about training. Oh, the most of their programs are postdocs. Yeah, there should be one. I think it's called I wish I could remember. A COSTEP. Commissioned Officer, I don't remember what the acronym stands for. But if you get Summer your email address, I can find it for you and send you the link. Their website is kind of confusing. Thanks.
Okay, I can definitely connect you two after this. I'll copy both of you on an email so you can get talking, and it seems very informative. Does anybody else have questions for Laura? I think Lisa has a question. Could you do tours via Skype?
Tours of, I'm sorry? Tours of CDC? Oh, the lab. No, I'm not even allowed into the lab. You need a special security clearance to get in there, so they only have people who work in the lab are allowed in the lab, and I just recently was able to get a tour of the lab, and it's really not all that exciting. The only part of CDC that you could go see, we do have a CDC museum that's open to the public. It's actually pretty cool. You get to try on a biohazard suit. It's kind of neat. And there's also a few other fun things in the CDC museum. And then other than that, it's just cubicles. So there's really not all that much to see, but they definitely wouldn't, they don't even allow pictures to be taken on campus. So I would,
I was just going to say the museum sounds really fun.
Yeah, it's free, and it's got kind of weird hours, but it's really cool, and it has an exhibit, an exhibit that changes, and right now they have one on NASA and CDC, and how CDC in the 1960s helped with a lot of the NASA space program back then, when they were worried about us taking bugs into space, and then the astronauts coming back with moon bugs and things like that. So it's a pretty interesting thing. I don't think a lot of people know about it either.
Okay, well, I guess we just have a couple of minutes, and I'll thank you so much, Laura, for being here, and thank you for such an informative. Is there a Second Life site for a CDC? Is that the question, Lisa?
That's a good question. I can find out. We don't have access to Second Life at work. Is blocked, so I can't tell. But I could ask around. I know we have a new Pinterest site coming out. If anyone's interested in that. Oh, that's my baby. I'm sorry.
Yeah, little kiss.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Laura, for being here, and thank you for an informative presentation from you. I know that a few people are very excited to hear about the CDC and about your progress and about how your degrees have helped you get to the point where you are. Thank you so much for being here. I guess we only have a couple minutes, so I guess I'll open it up to questions, and then I just wanted to point everybody again to our website behind me, the georgiabreakthrough.org site. We have a lot of modules and topics as discussion for our graduate or are interested in graduate students. You can see that we touch on a number of things: application process, selecting a grad school, GRE prep, graduate studies networking, financial aid, and research opportunities. So take a look whenever you get a chance. And there's a lot of good information there for people looking. And also, I'm sure that both of our speakers would be glad to, talk to people if they need to ask questions more in detail than this. And so thanks, everybody. I guess we'll see if there's a couple more questions. And anybody else have anything? Yes, we can. In the email that I send you, I'll send you the link to the GRE prep, and we can talk about that too. Thank you so much, everybody, again for coming, and special thanks to our speakers for taking time out of their busy schedules to inform us and enlighten us about just graduate school and about their experiences and about their careers. And so thank you to them.